So as for menstruation, Allah says in the Quran, and they ask you about menstruation, talking to the Prophet ﷺ, say it is an adha. Say it is an adha. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيدِ قُلْ هُوَ adha. So they ask you about menstruation, say it is an adha. Adha has the meaning of something that is harmful. So it could be something that actually brings harm to that person. And so we understand firstly that menstruation is something that it could be particularly painful to a woman. And so that may give us some wisdom into why there are things that a woman should leave off in that period. I mean, scholars can't necessarily determine these. This hikmah and this wisdom is with Allah. Why there are certain things that we leave off? But Allah at least says in the Quran that it is something that is painful. And so we say that perhaps one of the reasons that a lot of the things that are left off for a woman to do in that time is because this is a time where maybe she just wants to rest and she just wants to sort of take off, and she doesn't need to be burdened with other things under her responsibility. Of course, as women, we still do everything we have to do when we're in the time of menstruation, but we can consider it perhaps a rahmah from Allah, a mercy from Allah, that He has alleviated other burdens from us in that time. Okay? And so I want to see from you guys, what are the things that you know a woman is not supposed to do or a woman must leave off during the time of menstruation? There's some obvious ones, but there's actually altogether there's 7. Prayer. Okay, so that one is obvious and agreed upon, that she does not pray in that time. So you can say that she does not pray in that time, and she is not required to even make up those prayers afterwards. She's not required to make up those prayers afterwards. Yes? Touching the Quran, reading the Quran, this is something we will discuss. There's difference of opinion on the matter. Yes. So far we have one definitely everyone agrees on, prayer. Touching the Quran, reading the Quran, difference of opinion on the matter. Another one that definitely she cannot do, fasting. Yes. So prayer and fasting, definitely she cannot. Anything else? Intercourse. Yes, intercourse is a definite no on this side. All agree that that is not allowed between husband and wife, intercourse. So we had prayer, fasting, intercourse, touching the mushaf. Okay, another one which has difference of opinion? Entering the masjid. Entering the masjid, that has a difference of opinion. Passing by the masjid or entering the masjid, there's a difference of opinion on it. Okay, so we have 5, so there's 2 left. One that is left that everyone agrees on is she cannot be divorced in the time where she is in her period. So when she's in her period, her husband cannot say, I divorce you. He should wait till after she has finished her period. And then finally, let's see, is tawaf. Tawaf around the Kaaba. The Prophet ﷺ said directly that when Aisha radiallahu anha asked this question, that she began her period during that time, perhaps it was Umrah or Hajj, I can't remember right now, but he said, you can do everything except for the tawaf. So meaning sa'i was permissible for the women, the going between Safa and Marwa, going to Mina, going to Muzdalifah, going to Arafat, going to all of these places where it's permitted, because the Prophet ﷺ said specifically, do everything but leave the tawaf. Obviously, then also leave the prayer, because that was previously established. Okay, so it would be prayer, fasting, tawaf, intimacy, and divorce are all 5 agreed upon, and then disagreed upon, where different opinions are on touching the mushaf and entering the masjid. Okay, it's a little bit more than we always just think, okay, prayer and fasting, that's it. But there's a few more things. As for menstruation itself, menstruation in Arabic is called hayd. Hayd, that is the Arabic word for it, and the woman who is menstruating is called the ha'id. The ha'id. Now, scholars have particularly separated the blood that comes from a woman into 3 categories. Some will say 4, but we're just going to say 3. Number 1 is menstruation, so hayd. It's a very specific type of bleeding, and we'll describe it in a minute. Number 2 is nifas. Nifas, anyone heard of that before? What is nifas? Postpartum bleeding. So after the woman has delivered the child, then she will bleed for a long period of time. It can be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, extending to even a month and a half, even longer for some people. So that is nifas, and that is also a time, it has the same rules of menstruation, that she does not pray, fast, etc. in that time. And then the last one, the last type of bleeding is what they call istihaada, which means it is a bleeding that is not nifas nor menstruation. It is basically some other kind of illness that came to the woman, and therefore she began bleeding. And now with more medical knowledge, we can understand perhaps that was that, what is it called? Like a cyst may have burst inside her system, and so the blood is coming out. Or there was a cut somewhere in that area, and then the blood came out. So it is blood that is not the period blood. It is outside of the period, and we will consider it istihaada, a bleeding of illness or some other matter. Okay, so menstruation and nifas, period and postpartum bleeding take the same rulings. Istihaada takes different rulings. Okay, and so it's important then, the scholars say, we should define what is period bleeding versus what is the other type of bleeding, the illness type of bleeding, the istihaada. And so the scholars then describe it. And this description comes from, I mean, even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they would, because the women were very, wanted particularly to know what is this type of bleeding, what is that type of bleeding, they would sometimes take cotton or whatever they used to clean themselves. They would take like a sample and show it to Aisha radiallahu anha and say, what is this one exactly? Of course, in our day and age, that seems like that's not something we would want to do, that's disgusting. But they did not shy away from trying to understand the reality of what was going on within them. Right now we have science and doctors who can tell us, they'll test it and they'll tell us. But at that time they didn't, so they would take that blood and they would show it to Aisha radiallahu anha or other wives of the Prophet ﷺ, and they would determine what they were looking at. And so from that we get a description of what menstrual blood is versus istihaada, non-menstrual blood. And so menstrual blood, the description is, and you'll probably recognize this from your own self, is that it is a thicker type of blood. It is a thicker type of blood. So in your mind right now, compare, like if one got a paper cut, okay, that type of blood that comes out is usually free-flowing, like as if it was water, like easily flowing blood. Whereas they say menstrual blood is more clotted and thicker type of blood. And that goes back to anatomically what was happening in her body. The egg was getting ready for fertilization. It becomes like clumped and it becomes more thicker. And then when it is not fertilized, it comes out. And so it is a thicker blood in and of itself. So it is a thicker blood. And number two, it is a darker blood. So again, compared to the paper cut blood, it's this bright red, very light, like light bright red. Whereas the blood of menstruation in its regular flow will be dark. They say even aswad, that it, like if it was all together, you would say it looked like it's black almost. It's so dark red. They will describe it as dark red, as black, and as brown. Okay, these are all descriptions of that blood. So thick, dark, black, brown, or dark red. It has a particular smell. So it's supposed to have a smell, an odor that is not a good smell. So it's supposed to have sort of a bad smell, as opposed to, again, your paper cut. If you smelled the blood that came from just a simple paper cut, it doesn't necessarily have a bad smell. Maybe smells or tastes sort of like iron, right? If you've ever had blood in your mouth, it tastes sort of like iron, but it doesn't have a particularly strong bad odor. Whereas the blood of the menstruation does have a stronger, another odor, and not a pleasant one. And those would be the descriptions of menstruation. As for istihaada, other blood that may come out of her body, it would be thinner, just like a paper cut blood. It would be brighter red. It would not necessarily have a smell. And it has this property that when blood flows, like regular blood that comes out of our body, it flows first, and then after time it dries up and becomes like sort of, whatever blood does, it dries up and sort of comes clotted. Okay, so this is the difference between the menstrual blood and the istihaada blood. Why is it important to know which is which? Because we have to know what are the rulings for each. And so generally speaking, the rulings for menstrual blood are that you do not do all of these things, the 7 things that we mentioned. But the ruling for istihaada, this other blood that came from an illness, you do pray, fast, make tawaf, okay? All of the rulings still apply, that you may do all of these things. So that type of blood, that illness type of blood, doesn't prevent you from doing anything. The only one that it prevents her from doing is, they say, intimacy, and this is also a difference of opinion, but majority will say intimacy between the spouses is not permitted when she has the illness type of blood, and they say generally because that is just it's not a clean thing to do. It's not a clean thing and probably not healthy to do. Okay? So it's important for a woman to know the difference between her menstrual blood versus her istihaada blood. Okay, so as for menstruation, do you guys think there's an age minimum when someone might be able to get it, fiqh-wise? Like Islamically, we've dictated this is the age minimum that she can have her period at. 14? Minimum. 7 years old?
No, I'm asking what's the question.
What is the youngest age that a girl can be considered someone who menstruates? 7? Someone said 9? Yeah, so actually the scholars differ in this. Each of them give a slightly different number. Some say 9, some say 10, 7. I'm just giving numbers out there. But what they all mention in their books of fiqh is that Islamically there is no ordained minimum. This is just what the scholars saw from the people of their time. So Imam Shafi'i saw that the youngest woman that he had heard of the youngest woman was 9 years old. And so he put that as the minimum. Another scholar had heard another youngest age. And so what we say, what contemporary scholars will say, and now knowing and understanding more about medical knowledge, will say that there's no actual minimum. If a girl is 8.5 or 7.5, and she begins bleeding the blood of menstrual blood, which had all of those characteristics which we mentioned, do we say, okay, well, it's not menstruation because she's too young? No, we will say, or we'll take her to a doctor, and the doctor will say, yes, this is menstrual blood, and she has began her menstruation, even though she is young. So we'll say the correct opinion is that it can come at any age. It can come at any age, and if you want to be sure, go to a doctor and check. But the general age that it comes at, the usual age it comes, is between around 10 to 13. That's a usual age. But if it came earlier or if it came later, that is still permissible to be considered as menstruation. And so you'll see what's interesting about when reading the fiqh of what the scholars said, they often went just back to what was the norm of the people of their time. And so if someone without that knowledge just reads a book and says, oh, it should be 9, and before 9, if my daughter menstruated, this cannot be menstruation. Well, you're first of all, that's a person who's just reading a book and not knowing prior knowledge. That where did Imam Shafi'i get this opinion? And how did he come to this opinion? And even in his book, what's interesting enough is he'll mention that, yes, this is not based on Quran and Sunnah. We as scholars just made some sort of parameters so that people would be able to understand when it generally may happen. Okay? So if someone does menstruate before that, we'll still consider it menstruation. If you want to double check, you double check with a doctor. But you have all of the characteristics of menstruation that you already know that we've mentioned. Okay? The Prophet ﷺ even said about menstruation, he said it is aswad wa yu'raf. So he said it's something dark and it is something known. That a woman gets to know what her menstruation looks like, smells like, and is like, right? And so we go back to that. The woman at the end of the day, she knows what she's looking at. Of course, a first timer, a young girl, may not know, but her mother would help her in that situation. She would tell her, okay, this is what you are looking at. As for a maximum age that it may happen, there is no maximum age. Someone might get it at 16, 18. Someone may never get their menstruation. That is also a possibility. It's an abnormality, but a possibility. So we don't put like, well, if she hasn't started her menstruation at 18, then we'll just give her a fake artificial period. No. We do say she becomes an adult at a certain age. Like, say she never gets her menstruation at all. So does that mean she never became an adult Islamically? No. Scholars will put it between sometimes 15, 16, 17. They'll differ on the age because they made their own parameters, right? But she may not ever bleed. That is a possibility. And then going on that, do you think there's a maximum age where a woman would stop bleeding, where menopause would occur and she would stop bleeding? Do you think there should be an established amount? So again, it goes back to the same principle. The scholars came up with numbers. Some say 45, some say 50, some say 55. But they all agree at the end. They say, we've put these numbers out there because that is what we saw from the women of our time, what they had experienced. So if a woman is 56, now she's gone beyond the maximum that the scholars have mentioned, does that mean now she's not menstruating? At 56, she still sees her regular menstruation. Does that mean she's not menstruating? No, that means she is still menstruating, and that she is just, her normal is slightly different from the normal of what the scholars had discussed at that time. And so a lot of what we'll see again is the blood of menstruation is known, and the woman knows it, and when it comes, she knows what it is. Okay? And when she doesn't know what it is, and it doesn't look like menstrual blood, then we should put it under the category of istihaada. Under the category of istihaada. And what is the rulings of istihaada? Means she still can pray and fast and do these different things, etc. Okay. A pregnant woman. Let's get a vote. Who thinks that a pregnant woman can have her menstruation? Who thinks a pregnant woman should not ever have menstruation? And then the rest of you? Still waiting to hear the answer. This is something the scholars debated, but generally speaking, a woman who is pregnant should not have her menstruation. That is anatomically what should not happen, right? Because her period means that the egg was not fertilized. If the egg is fertilized and now she's having a child, so then she shouldn't be regularly having her menstruation. However, so some scholars will say any blood that a woman sees during her pregnancy, you don't consider that menstruation. You consider that istihaada. She keeps praying and fasting, etc. during that 9 months pregnancy. One scholar, Ibn Uthaymin, rahimahullah, will say, he said only if she's pregnant and she sees the exact same blood that she knows to be menstruation, that it was dark and black and thick, and it came on the same day it usually comes, and it lasts for that same 6 days it usually lasts, then he said only in that case we'll consider it menstruation, and we'll just say that's perhaps an abnormality that she has, that her menstruation still comes even though she is pregnant. So this is a minority opinion. But majority will say no, any blood that comes during pregnancy is probably a result of something else. And we know women, they spot during pregnancy. That is not a result of a menstruation. The doctor will tell you, this is happening in your body, this is happening in your pregnancy, something's happening in your pregnancy, that's why you're spotting, or something's happening. So the majority opinion is that any of the blood she sees during her pregnancy, she should still fast and pray, etc. Alright. As for the menstruation duration, the scholars again have given some sort of parameters. So meaning how long does that menstruation last? 1 day, 4 days, 8 days, 11 days, etc. And so the scholars even differed on this. For example, Imam Abu Hanifa said the smallest amount of days is 3 days. That's the shortest period someone could have. Whereas Imam Shafi'i said it is 24 hours, so a full day is the minimum amount she can bleed. Whereas other scholars said even a couple of hours, that can be considered menstruation. And so what it goes down to, what contemporary scholars will agree with, is the parameters or the numbers they gave again was based on what they saw of the people. That they saw that it was normal that 3 days was how long that the women had their minimum period, so he said it at that. Imam Abu Hanifa said it at that. Whereas Imam Shafi'i had maybe heard of a woman who had only had her period for 1 day. Okay. As for contemporary scholars, they'll say the period is yu'raf. It is known to the woman. So when the day she starts bleeding, and it is all those characteristics that she knows it is, even though it lasts only a short time, maybe it only lasts half a day or 1 day, so the contemporary scholars will say, you consider that menstruation because it followed all the characteristics of menstruation. So should she pray in that time and fast in that time when she saw it and she knew it was menstruation? That's outside of the realm of what we should do rationally. She saw menstrual blood, but then she still prayed and she still fasted because it was very, very short. So contemporary scholars will say, if you know that it is menstrual blood, then do not fast and do not pray, even if it lasts a very short amount of time. Even if it lasts a very short amount of time. Okay? So say someone only gets their period for 1 day, but in Imam Abu Hanifa's madhab, it has to be minimum of 3 days. So in Imam Abu Hanifa's madhab, it would say that 1 day that she bled, you don't consider that menstruation. But like I said, a stronger opinion is to take that if she notices that it is the blood of menstruation, then she should leave off praying and fasting, etc. Because that is the ruling that Allah put upon her. Right? That is the ruling that Allah put upon her. When she sees it, she should leave these things. Some scholars made, to preface this book, the scholar made it very, very easy. He said, if you don't want to listen to a lecture for 2-3 hours or a couple of days and understand all the rulings, just take these 3 principles. When she sees the blood of menstruation, which is known to her, then she leaves off all these things. When she sees purity and it is known to her that she is now pure, then she does all of these things. And when she sees a blood that she's not familiar with, that doesn't follow the blood of menstruation, then she also still prays and fasts and does all these things. So you can just take all those 3 principles and leave right now, and it should give you a good idea of it. But it is better to go into more detail. But that, I say, is a good understanding to go with. If it is the blood of period that you know and understand, then leave off the things which you're supposed to leave off. And if it is a different type of blood, then continue doing those things. If it is a blood mashkukun fihi, where there is doubt in it, there is shak in it, you're not sure what kind of blood it is, then consider it istihaada. Consider it a blood of illness, because you know what your period blood looks like. Okay, and this is talking for normal people who have regular periods. They regularly see their period, they regularly see what it looks like. They see something out of the ordinary, consider it istihaada. Don't at the first second of blood that you don't recognize say, oh, I must be on my period. No, look at it, identify it, observe it, and try to see, does it have the characteristics of my regular period? Is it in the time that my regular period would have occurred, etc.? You have to ask your questions. A lot of this rulings in regards to period, you're not going to have a scholar who's going to give you the answers on a day-to-day basis, right? At the end of the day, the woman is going to make her decisions on a day-to-day basis. That's why it's good to understand these in great detail, because you are going to sort of be the judge and executioner in your case in most months of your life, right? You're going to be the one who makes that decision. So it's important to know it, and also to know that if a woman makes a mistake, that she says, well, I thought this was period blood, but it was actually istihaada or whatever, that Allah is merciful, because we are not doctors who have the test kits with us every day to test, was this period blood, was this not period blood. She does what is to the best of her ability, and then what she made a mistake for, then Allah is merciful. Then Allah is merciful. Okay, so as for minimum, some put it at 24 hours, some put it at 3 days, and like I said, the stronger opinion is as short as it may be, but it was period blood, so that is her shortest period. As for the longest period, so the Imam Abu Hanifa mentioned 10 days. Again, this was going back to what was the regular of his people of his time, that 10 days was the maximum that a woman would have her period. And Imam Shafi'i, for example, said 15 days. Another scholar said, I believe so, 15 days. Some said 14, some said 15. So they said it's possible that she may have her menstrual period all the way up to 14 days. Okay? And they said this is within the realm of possibility. Though it's not the norm, they say the norm, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the norm when a woman asked him. He said the norm is about 6 to 7 days. Wallah, and Allah knows best. So he mentioned that I don't really know altogether, because everyone is different, but the norm to his best knowledge is 6 to 7 days, and we can see that through studies. That is generally the norm for women, but that didn't mean that a woman may not bleed beyond that. So she could bleed beyond that. She could bleed up until 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay. So what scholars will say is up until 14, 15, this is within the realm of possibility, and if a woman sees the blood of haid, the blood of menstruation that has those characteristics up to 14 days, then she is ha'id in that time, and she should not do any of those actions. Even if it's up to 14 days, even if we say that seems abnormal, right? But it is within the realm of possibility. And if you were to see research about women what their periods are, you will see that it is within the normal realm of possibility to have a woman who bleeds up to 15 days today. As it was perhaps normal at that time, you'll see it's still possible today. You'll still see 6 to 7 is the norm, but 15 is also possible. And 1 is also possible. Okay? And so we'll say within the realm of possibility, 15 is normal. What the scholars say is when it goes beyond that number, then most likely, and this is saying anatomically, most likely she probably has some illness. Like because if we understand the way a period works, it means that regularly, once a month, the body is having an egg and dropping an egg and releasing an egg. And then the time she's releasing the egg should last 6 to 7 days, up to 14 days. if bleeding is going beyond that 15, 16, 17, 20 days out of the month, then that should, put some alert in the mind of that woman that maybe something is abnormal and maybe not all of this is menstrual blood, because this is what should not normally happen in a woman's cycle. So in that case, I would say she should definitely, if a woman bleeds beyond 15 days, she should go to the doctor and try to figure out what is going on. And majority of the time, your doctor will tell you what is the issue. That yes, okay, you did have a period in the beginning, but this coming here at the end is some sort of other problem or disease or illness that you are facing. And so it's important to know, we should know the fiqh, but we should also allow the fiqh to alert us that something else perhaps is going on. We don't just see istihaada as, okay, this is the time, this illness blood is the time where I can still pray and fast. Istihaada should also alert us that, I should probably go to the doctor and check out what's happening. I should also check out what's happening. And so we'll say that up to 15, we say a woman can menstruate, and beyond that, then it is likely that it is istihaada, that it is likely that there is some sort of illness, and she should go to the doctor and check it out. And I have, for example, a student who mentioned that she has bleeding up until 14 days, but she said her doctor said it was all menstruation. It is all within the realm of normal. And so that's something important to do. If you see your menstrual cycle is so long and you think it's abnormal, go to your doctor and check it out. Likely you will find between 14 and 15 days that is still within the realms of normal. It is on the fringe, right? That's not what a lot of people have, but it is within the realms of normal. And so in that time you would still not pray, and you would still not pray and not fast, etc. Now a good question is, if I take the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa that the maximum time is 10 days. So what Imam Abu Hanifa would say is, if the maximum is 10 days, then anything after 10 days, don't consider it your period anymore, consider it an illness type of bleeding. And she prays and she fasts. Now there's a question now that this is what the contemporary scholars will ask. If on day 10 she saw the dark blood that was thick, she knew it was her period blood, right? A woman knows what her period blood looks like. And then on day 11, she still sees the dark blood that is thick, that is in her mind definitely the same blood. So should she use her rationale, or should she just go by the fiqh opinion? So I would say either is permissible at the end of the day, because we say that the opinions of the scholars, we can take the opinions of the scholars because they've done so much research to get to that point. I'd say it is permissible for her to say that 10 days is my maximum. However, contemporary scholars will argue that, does it make sense rationally that one was period blood and the next is not, just because a day has passed? So they say, no, you should know what your period blood is, and you should know that on day 10 and 11 and 12, those were all the same blood, so you should rationally consider it period blood. Rationally, you should consider it period blood. And again, going back to where did Imam Abu Hanifa's opinion come from, or those opinions? It came from what? Not the Quran or Sunnah, and they say it themselves, it came from what they saw of the women at their time. What they saw at the women of their time. So should we go based on that the women at that time had maximum of 10, and so ours shouldn't go beyond 10? I think it makes sense, and to me the more stronger opinion is we should go based on what we see and what we know. If we knew on day 10 it was period blood and day 11 it was period blood, so consider it period blood. Once it goes beyond 15, that's like the highest any scholar has mentioned, then we should definitely get ourselves checked out to see, do we have some sort of illness? Then in that case, you figure out what is your illness, and you say, well then perhaps after 15 it is istihaada, and I would not pray. And I would not pray. Okay. Okay, as for the woman determining her regular cycle, the scholars say, for example, the first time a woman, a girl, she'll be young, 10, 11 years old, has her period, she does not do anything in that time, and she should mark. She should be aware of her body, and she should mark when her period began and ended and how long it lasted. So say the first time it lasted 5 or 6 days. And it began at the beginning of the month, January 1st, and it ended 6 days later. Okay? A woman should mark and be used to these things because she needs to establish a pattern, so she has something to go back to, right? She has something to go back to. So if she determined the first month, and of course with the help of her mother or others in her family, she determines, okay, 6 days the first month. And then 1 month later it came again, and it was 7 days. That means she would leave prayer for 7 days. And then the next month it comes for 10 days. Are these all within the realm of normal? Yes. So we'll say then she sits out for all those, the 6 days the first time, the 7 days the first time, 10 days the next time. And we know in the beginning it's sort of irregular, so it may not be the same amount. But eventually for some women it becomes very regular. Say a couple years into it, she knows it's always 6 days, it's always 28 days apart, and this is how I know my period blood. And so the scholars say in that case then, if a woman is say like 20 and she's been having her period for 10 years now, and it's set as beginning of the month for 6 days, then one random time, say January 1st she got her period and she's expecting it on February 1st. Then all of a sudden, in the middle of January, after she's finished her 6 days, she does see some blood. That should be something to alert her that this is probably not period blood. She'll go look at all the characteristics. She'll see, is it dark and is it thick and all these things. If she can't really determine it, she has something to go back to. And what she has to go back to is her aada, is her habit. That it usually came on the first of every month for only 6 days. And now this is coming in the middle of the month. And I don't know what to do with it. So the woman should immediately, what do you think? Think of it as menstruation or think of it as istihaada? What do you think? She should initially think of it as istihaada, because her habit has been established. Her habit has been established as the beginning of the month for 6 days only, and now this is in the middle of the month, and I can't really determine it's only the beginning of this blood coming, so I can't really determine if it's menstruation blood or some other type of blood. So she should identify it as istihaada, and she should continue praying. If eventually she's able to determine that this was menstrual blood, okay, then she can say, okay, that was all menstrual blood and something strange is happening with me, and maybe I need to reconsider what is my new normal. And that happens. Women change, their new normal changes from time to time. As they grow older, it might get longer, it might get shorter, whatever it may be. So you should be regularly, consistently checking what is your new normal. What is your new normal? And going back to that as a reference when something abnormal happens. Okay, to end the conversation on period, we will mention that the scholars discussed about also a minimum length of purity for a woman. Some scholars said it is possible that a woman's minimum length of purity could be only like 13 days. That she bleeds for 6-7 days, and then she's only pure for 13 days, and then she bleeds again for 6-7 days. And they said this is within the realm of possibility of things they saw at that time. What you want to determine is that if a woman, this is regularly happening to her, then you know, and it has all the characteristics of period blood, then we say it is her period. So she may bleed for 7 days and be off for only 2 weeks, and then bleed again for 7 days and be off for only 2 weeks. This is within the realm of possibility. And a woman would determine that by seeing how regularly it happens. If this is what happens all the time, and it has the characteristics of period blood, that is her period. However unfortunate we feel for those women, like for them it's like that's a lot of period time that they have. And maybe they're not happy with that, and we say Allah help them with the struggles that they may go with in that. If they have a lot of pain throughout that, then we ask Allah to ease their struggles. But that is still within the realm of possibility. Also, they've mentioned in terms of the period blood, if someone's period stops in between their regular period. This is something important to mention. And scholars differ on this, but I'll tell you what I believe is the strongest opinion and the opinion of contemporary scholars. And that is, for example, a woman regularly has a 7-day period at the beginning of every month. And then in the middle, on day 3, she doesn't see anything. She doesn't see anything come out. Her pad is clean for 12 hours, for 24 entire hours. Even the next day she wakes up and she doesn't see anything. But she knows it's been 7 days for the last 10 years. Okay? What is permissible, scholars say for her to do, is to wait a full day and see if it comes back. And they say that likely it is a normal thing that it may go away and come back. Say it happened for 3 days. On the 4th day she saw absolutely nothing, but then it came back again on 5, 6, and 7. they say that all of these days, the contemporary scholars and opinions of even older scholars will say this is all her period. She should not ghusl and pray on this middle day because this is still all a part of the period of menstruation. The objective of menstruation is for the egg to be released and all of those things in the womb to be fully released. In these 7 days, is she still not in that same period of time? So even though cleanliness came, they say that the period did not end and she would leave prayer and fasting in that 1 day of cleanliness. They call it the day of doubt, but then it comes back. So if someone regularly sees this, 3 days period, 1 day off, and then 3 more days of period, they say this is all a part of your period. There is, like I said, an opinion that no, she should, if she sees an entire day off, then she should make ghusl and begin praying. So that is the opinion that is more a cautious opinion. But if a woman realizes that this is a regular thing, that this middle day is always off, then she can, the next month and the next month and the next month, always expect that to be off and expect it to be a part of her period. And you think of it this way, that this is the time that she's not supposed to pray. It's because of this action in her body taking place. Because it hasn't stopped, you consider yourself still ha'id. She is still the state of a woman who is menstruating. Even though flow is not coming that day, she is still a woman whose egg is being released from her body. The process has not ended. Okay? So even a day and a half, what is in the realm of possibility, then she would still consider that part of her period. If it becomes like the second day now, 48 hours and counting, then she should perhaps, and this is again where you become your own person who decides on your own. You say, well, 2 days has been really long and this is really strange and it's never happened to me, so she should ghusl and she should start praying again. If she sees the blood now the next day, so we'll say, well, then those 2 days were still a part of her period. Okay? But it's something we have to decide on ourselves. We look in the regularity of ourselves, the regularity of missing that day. They call it the niqah, just a pause in between. You can consider it a part of your period. As for the end of the period, this actually came, Aisha radiallahu anha mentions it herself, that women would often come to her with cotton with some sort of marking on it. Some had light red, some had light brown, some had very murky substances. This was all the women's ends of their period, and they were just trying to make sure, is this the end? Is this the end? Is this the end? And Aisha radiallahu anha, she was saying to them, do not try to rush the end of it. The end will come when you see a white fluid that comes out, a clear white fluid that comes out. Up until that point, very, very light pink, very, very light brown. These are all still remnants of your period, and consider it a part of your period. Wait till the white fluid comes out. It's white and sometimes slightly yellow, white or yellow fluid. It is a fluid that indicates a new fluid is now coming from your body. All of the remnants of the period are gone. So even if 4 days it's heavy flow, and the last 2 days is very light flow, spotting, pink, whatever it may be, that is still a part of her period that is coming out, and the remnants are coming out. And Aisha radiallahu anha said specifically, wait till that white clear fluid comes out, then you have finished your period. Some women do not get that. It is a norm to get it, but it is also possible that a woman does not get that. In that case, the scholars say, if she sees dryness for a long extended period of time, say 6 days is her norm, and now on the 6 days she sees dryness, she should take some cotton, or what they used at that time, cotton. In our case, we'd use toilet paper, and just put it slightly up the private part, and if it comes out clean, then that means she has most likely finished her period. Okay? So for the end of the period, look for the white fluid or the slightly yellow fluid that indicates a new fluid, and then she has ended her period. Okay? And this is something, honestly, I'm so glad I studied this, because there were so many questions I used to have. In the past, I used to, when I just had a little bit, the light pink, I would think, oh, my period's finished, I should already start praying. But when you read the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, it's directly to those women who did that. They would come with light pink and is this not the end? She said, no, that's not the end, that's still a part of your period. Imagine if you're trying to clean a bottle that had some blue, really colorful blue juice, like blueberry juice. You first took out all the blueberry juice, all of that color that came out was blue. Then you put a lot of water in that bottle, and you try to clean it out. When it's still slightly a light blue, you know there's still remnants of that blueberry juice still in your bottle, right? Then you put a lot of water in again, and you clean it out, and you still see a tiny remnant of that blue. You say, oh, there's still remnants of it coming out. Only that fourth or fifth time where you take it out and you see completely clear fluid, that meant that there was no more of that juice left. Similarly in our body, when we see it completely clear, or in other people who don't see that, completely dry and nothing comes out, then we say that that is the end of the period. Even the remnants are a part of the period. Okay? So we'll end that with, that is the end of the discussion about period. I'll just have a quick talk about istihaada blood. So they say if a woman who is continuously bleeding, she can't figure it out period from not period, but she's just always bleeding and she doesn't know, they say that woman should go back to her aada, if she used to have an aada, her regular habit. So if she used to have 6 days at the beginning of the month all the time, and then all of a sudden she starts this regular bleeding that happens all the time, you know, all the time, 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, she doesn't know what type of bleeding it is. They say she should go back to her aada, which means she goes back to her 6 days that she regularly had. Because it's saying she's bleeding like the whole month, and the next month, and the next month. So she should take that first 6 days of the month like her usual habit, and she should fix that as her period, and fix the rest as her istihaada, because she has no way to judge. Another one, they say if you don't have an aada, if you don't have a habit, you take the habit of the people of your family. So your mother or your sister, people in your family, if they had generally 8 days. So then you take the aada of your family. And if you have nothing to go back to on your family, then you go back to the locality or of where you are. Like you do the statistics or research of what is the norm of the people in 2017 in wherever you are. 6 days, 7 days, you take that as your norm. This is for the woman who's continuously always bleeding. Continuously always bleeding. As for the woman who has like bleeding and then 3 months later bleeding, when she sees the blood of menstruation, she stops doing what she's not supposed to do. When she doesn't see it, even if it's 3-4 months of purity, then she's pure. Okay? So the question is more for the woman who continuously is always bleeding. She should take the aada or the habit of either herself in the past, or people in her family, or people of her locality, and if she has nothing to go on, then at least she can go on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ who said that it is generally 6 to 7 days. So that she can take as her norm, because she really can't figure out what a norm is when she has all of this bleeding continuously. That is it. I will take quick questions.
The right way of cleaning after your period in Islam, I mean, I think that would be good for the girls.
The correct way of cleaning.
What is explaining what the right way of doing it?
Sure. Okay, so ghusl, and I'll just go over it quickly. So once the period has been identified as finished, then a woman takes ghusl. This is mandatory upon a woman, and it is also mandatory after intimacy between husband and wife, and also wet dreams. All of these things require a woman or man to ghusl. So for sure, definitely menstruation, the period blood requires a woman to ghusl. That illness blood doesn't require her to ghusl. What they say, if a woman has the blood of illness, then she just makes wudu, she cleans that area, ties it up, meaning she puts something to keep it not from flowing, and she makes wudu before every prayer. That's for the woman who's ill. As for the woman who is menstruating, after she's menstruated, she does ghusl. The basic ghusl is, the fard of ghusl is that water touches every part of the body, including the hair, scalp, all of the parts of the body. The actions of the ghusl, the sunan of the ghusl is, the woman begins with basmala. This is a difference of opinion, but she begins, it's good to begin anything with bismillah. Then she washes her hands 3 times. Okay? Then she washes the private parts 3 times. Okay? So washing the hands is getting your hands clean, so that when you touch your private parts, they are clean. So you wash the private part 3 times. Then she makes her regular wudu. This is all probably in the shower. She makes her regular wudu, all the actions of wudu. Okay, there's opinion that you can leave the feet out till the end, or you can do the feet then. Then you do 3 times of water over her right side of her body. And she washes it down by rubbing it. So not just water, but she should rub it. Okay, rub that part of the body. Then 3 times on the left side with water, and she should rub that part of the body down. And then 3 times over her head, where she is getting all parts of her hair wet to where her scalp is also getting wet. And then she has completed her ghusl. Okay, she has completed her ghusl. The minimum requirement of ghusl is that all parts of the body are wet. The sunan of ghusl, or the one we should aspire to do regularly, are these actions which the Prophet ﷺ outlined. Again, hands, private part, wudu, 3 times right, 3 times left with rubbing, and then the hair 3 times. And then she is out of the state of hayd. She's out of the state of menstruation, and she prays and does regularly what she would regularly do. Anyone have questions about that?
Yeah, how about now if someone notices it's out of the uncleanness time and then but still they're on the go, they're at school, how can they perform ghusl at that time? Can be delayed or?
So it is not permissible to be delayed. It is the reality that it may be delayed, but Islamically we can't say that it can be delayed, like she's at work or school. If she has the ability to go and shower, then that is what is obligatory upon her. If she doesn't, then that is unfortunate, and she would then, when she gets home, make up those prayers that she missed. So say at Dhuhr time, say Fajr time, she still saw remnants. At Dhuhr time, she now sees there's absolutely nothing left, and that she sees the white fluid or she sees complete dryness. So now Dhuhr is obligatory upon her, but she's at school. So it would be best, and it's obviously not always easy to do, to go shower then so that she doesn't miss Dhuhr. If it is the case that she misses it, then she has to do qada. She has to make up that Dhuhr. So she'll go home, maybe it's now Asr time, she goes home, she makes ghusl, and then she prays her Dhuhr, and then she prays her Asr. She prays her Dhuhr as made up. There is the opinion, and the Prophet ﷺ said it himself, but it's used in very small, very rare situations, that if someone has some very pressing matter or someone is sick or something like that, there is the possibility sometimes for someone to join the Dhuhr and Asr prayer together. So we say perhaps a woman who feels like she's in that case, like she's at work, at school, they won't let her leave, and she misses the Dhuhr, she can make the intention that this is one of those rare times where she will combine the Dhuhr and Asr together. She still prays them full, but one right after the other, and she prays for the rahmah, mercy from Allah, that He'll accept these as a combined prayer. And so that is allowed in very rare occasions. The Prophet ﷺ allowed it when, for example, it was raining really hard outside, really hard outside, and someone would not be able to get to the masjid. He said you could possibly combine your prayers then at that time. This is like extreme weather conditions. Now we have cars and things that allow us to go out and do things in the weather. Or someone is very sick, like they're going in and out of consciousness, and now they're conscious and it's Dhuhr time, so they may pray Dhuhr and Asr together. This is a rare occasion where it's happening. And then scholars will say that it's perhaps allowed for the menstruating woman who can't go out to ghusl. We'd love if there was, ability for her to go, but she's not able to. So perhaps she takes this as one of those rare times and asks Allah for mercy that He accepts this as an acceptable combination. But this is something that the Prophet ﷺ did, I believe, or he mentioned it being done only once in his life. So it's not like something he did regularly, every other day, every other week, but something he did very rarely, and he said the situation has to be sort of dire and necessary. So do we want to talk about masjid and mushaf and then questions? Masjid and touching the Quran? Okay. So as for, I'll tell you what is agreed upon that she's allowed to do. The woman can recite du'as. So in the state of menstruation, a woman can recite du'as that she knows. She can do dhikr, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, those things during her menstruation. And then majority will say she can also read the Quran. Okay, we're not talking about touching the Quran. At this point, she's reading the Quran, an ayah that she already knows or memorized. She's going over ayahs that she's already memorized. So majority will say this is permissible. Those who say it's not permissible, it goes back to the fact that there is a hadith that the one who is in a state of janaba should not, that was the time that the Prophet ﷺ did not recite the Quran. So Ali radiallahu anhu says the Prophet ﷺ was always in the state of reciting Quran, but not when he was in the state of janaba. Janaba is sexual impurity after husband and wife have had intimate relationships. And so the Prophet ﷺ left reciting Quran at that time. Those who disallowed a menstruating woman from reciting Quran, they said that these are analogous. That a person who's in a state of janaba, sexual impurity, and a woman who's in a state of menstruation are similar, and they are alike. You can make arguments for why they're similar or alike, that it's both, they're both like a period of time where someone cannot pray. Like the similar rules go for the junub and the one who is menstruating. They cannot pray fast, they cannot pray and things like that. However, those who say there is no analogy between the two, they say that the one who's in a state of janaba, they can get out of it at any time they desire. They can be in a state of janaba and 5 minutes later they can get out of it. They have the ability to get out. Whereas a menstruating woman doesn't have that freedom. She has to wait until the end of her period. Also that the state of janaba has to do with sexual impurity, which is a very different type of what menstruation is. It has nothing to do with sexual. So they said there is really no analogy between the two, and we will not make analogy between rules of janaba and rules of menstruation. So I'll tell you right now, there's a difference of opinion. That those who make it analogous will say all rules relating to the junub, they go for the menstruating woman. The others say no, we will not consider those analogous. And they're both valid opinions. I hold the opinion that, from my understanding, that they're not analogous. I see them as very different. And the fact that if it was supposed to be that the menstruating woman cannot read Quran, so wouldn't it have also been mentioned specifically? Where the junub shouldn't read Quran, so shouldn't it also have been mentioned the menstruating should not read the Quran? Since there's no specific hadith mentioning that, so we say the stronger opinion is she's permitted to recite Quran and read Quran if she likes to. And think about this, for example, a woman who, and we'll say there's cases where this happened, she's menstruating for 2 weeks, and she's only pure for 2 weeks, and she's menstruating for 2 weeks. Imagine how much of her life she would be away from the Quran. Like say she wants to find solace in the Quran, but she takes the opinion that she's not even allowed to read it, not even recite ayahs that she knows, then she is away from the Quran for a long time. So I think it is a better and stronger opinion to take that she's permitted to recite the Quran, the ayahs that she knows, even trying to memorize new ayat, as long as she's not touching it. The opinion of a woman touching it, it's not even just the menstruating woman, it's saying, there's the ayah in the Quran that no one should touch it, talking about the Quran, except for the purified ones. This is an ayah in the Quran. Majority of the scholars will say then, you need to be purified to touch the Quran. Which means even if someone doesn't have wudu, they shouldn't touch the Quran. So to touch the Quran, you should have wudu. To touch the Quran, you should be out of the state of menses. To touch the Quran, you should be out of the state of janaba. So it goes to everybody. It's not just for the menstruating woman. That is the majority opinion. There is a minority opinion that says this is not regarding humans. The ayah is not regarding humans. The ta'wil of the ayah, the possible interpretation of the ayah from some scholars is this ayah is talking about the angels. And it is regarding the lawhul mahfuz, the Quran that is a preserved tablet in the skies, in the heavens, which there is a preserved tablet. Allah talks about al-lawhul mahfuz, the preserved tablet, like the Quran that is in the heavens. Then slowly it was revealed down to us, ayahs by ayahs at a time, it was revealed down to the Prophet ﷺ. So they say that this is referring to that lawhul mahfuz. Nobody touches it except for the mutahhirun, and they meant the angels. So no one's even allowed to access this except for, of course, Allah and the angels. For example, Angel Jibreel would reveal those ayat down. So that is a minority opinion. In that minority opinion, it says that is talking about angels, therefore it's not talking about human beings, that human beings don't have to be purified to touch the Quran. Okay, so that minority opinion exists, and so if you see someone who takes that opinion, we should not have any feeling of anger or anything towards them. This is a valid opinion. It is a minority opinion. Majority opinion will be that was regarding humans, and all humans should be purified before touching the Quran. We also talk about in regards to what is a Quran. The scholars discuss what is a Quran, what can she touch and not touch. They say if it is a book of translation of the Quran, English translation, they say this is not considered the Quran. So it's permitted for her to touch a book of translation of Quran. They say specifically what's being talked about is the ayat of the Quran of a book of Quran. And they say if the majority of this book that you're holding in your hand is Quranic ayat, say it's mostly a book of Quran and there's some footnotes at the bottom, then they say the majority takes the ruling. So if it's majority Quran and ayat and Arabic, then that is what she should not touch. But if it is majority, like 95% English translation and then a few ayat of the Quran, then she is permitted to touch that, to go through the pages, everything. This is an agreement of the scholars. As for the things which are like 50-50, so the scholars will say, like it's half translation, half Quran. The scholars will say different opinions, some that no, this is the Quran, others that no, it is, half not the actual ayat. So she's permitted to touch this book. She should just not touch her finger to the ayat that are Arabic. Okay? Now the safest opinion is that if she wants to touch any of these books, she should just have a barrier between her and the book. So if, for example, she has some people use pencils. They use a pencil to move from one page to the other, right? Use something like that. She uses a piece of cloth to move from one page to the other. So this is permissible. And this would be for the menstruating woman as well as the person who doesn't have wudu. Someone doesn't have wudu, but they need to grab this Quran right now. Okay? So just use your shirt or whatever it is and use that to be on the more safe side. Okay, so majority opinion is she shouldn't touch it directly. If it is fully a book of Quran, if it is a book of translation, no problem, she can touch it. If it is a book of half-half, do not touch the ayat directly. One way to get out of all of this is the scholars say if you use something, this is contemporary scholars, if you use an iPad or a tablet, there's nothing wrong with touching this because this is not actually the Quran. You're touching a screen, which is not actually the Quran. Your phone and your iPad have hundreds of other things on it, so this is not actually the Quran. Other scholars will say, sure, she can touch the iPad and everything, but she should still not touch the ayat of the Quran on her iPad. Okay, so many different opinions in this matter. There are still many ways to go about it, where she can still read the Quran, still recite the Quran, still have a relationship with the Quran. And I'd say the best opinion is that she puts a barrier between herself and that book. Okay, that she puts a barrier between herself and that book. And finally, in regards to a woman coming into the masjid. Okay, so the majority of opinion is that she is not permitted to come to the masjid and sit in the masjid. And that is because of a hadith the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that particularly. The mosque is not permitted for menstruating women or anyone who is in a state of janaba. So this is a direct hadith. However, many scholars of the past, not contemporary, but many scholars of the past said that this hadith has weakness in it. And then they discuss in detail the weakness that they see in this hadith. Those who considered it weak said that we cannot make a fiqh ruling based on a weak hadith. This is a rule of fiqh, that you cannot make a fiqh ruling that is binding based on a hadith that is weak. Based on a hadith that is weak. And so this being the only evidence that is there, generally the only evidence that is there, all the other evidence that they use that a woman cannot enter the masjid go back to relating her to the one who is in a state of janaba. Meaning they made analogy between the one who is in a state of janaba and the ha'id. So all those other opinions say that the person who is junub should not come into the masjid. Does that mean a woman who's menstruating shouldn't? According to some, yes, they're analogous. According to others, no. They're not analogous. So if you take the opinion that the one who is junub and menstruating are not analogous, so those ayat and those hadith do not apply to the menstruating woman. If you consider this hadith weak, this one hadith that they have that is used weak, then you will say that then there is not strong enough evidence to create the rule